Here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former six-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, I don't care. You're not going to like this. The summer's winding down. I know you're excited about football, but I hate to see the summer end. And there's really no big fights until Terrence Crawford and Canelo fight on September 13th on Netflix. So we're waffling a little bit for content.
I'll make you a deal, Frank. We can talk football if you connect it to boxing. For example, your Miami Dolphins, I asked you, what fighter would you compare them to? But you were sarcastic. I wanted you to give me a serious answer.
I forget. Who did I say?
Joe Hip. Joe Hip. Come on. Tell me, name some. Tell me Franz Botha or someone like that. But don't tell me Joe Hip.
Jack, Franz Botha had title shots. The Dolphins haven't played for the title since 1984.
Everyone has title shots in boxing. If
you're going by their history, I'm going by this century.
If the same rules applied in football, if it was run the same way as boxing, the Dolphins would be at least a one-time champion in the last 10 years. They would be given a belt, a sanctioning body belt that was vacated.
I don't even think they qualify for that, Jack, in this watered-down boxing. Now,
the Chiefs, the Eagles would have elected to play. For example, the Chiefs had elected to play the Buffalo Bills, but the Dolphins would have been made the mandatory challenger. And the Dolphins would have gotten the vacated title, which they would have soon lost.
I don't even think they're worthy of that, Jack. And I predict on August 4th, 2025, that next year their quarterback will be gone and their coach will be gone.
I don't disagree. You know, you mentioned a date that has some meaning to me, August 4th, but it was 1970. I was at Madison Square Garden to see George Foreman stop George Chuvalo in 3 rounds. What are your recollections of that fight?
That George Foreman was a wrecking machine that night. And it was one of the few times I felt sorry for Chuvalo, because at the end of that fight, Foreman had him pinned in a corner and he was just pounding away. I thought when I saw that fight, Jack, I don't think I saw that was a closed circuit fight. I don't think I saw that one until later. But Foreman was an absolute wrecking machine. He was mean. He had a jab. He didn't care what you threw back at him. And he was like, I know Frazier stopped Chuvalo, but boy, Foreman beat him up so bad. I felt bad for Chuvalo.
You know what I just realized, Frank? So many heavyweight champions have been moved slowly compared to George Foreman. When he fought Chuvalo, he was only a pro a couple of years. When no less, he had turned pro June 23rd, 1969.
So he's a pro for 13 months.
Right. And
14 months.
He's in with a seasoned, tough guy like George Chuvalo. I remember calling up Nat Lubay, who was the editor of Ring Magazine at the time, okay? I shouldn't say it was the editor. Nat Fleischer was still alive, so he was the editor. But Nat Lubay was Fleischer's son-in-law, and he became the editor when Fleischer passed away a couple of years later. And I used to kind of bug them. I was a kid on boxing, and they were used to getting my annoying calls. But
that's how I was with Jimmy Jacobs, Jack, in the 80s. Exactly. Late 70s, early 80s.
But they would usually be nice. They would put up with us, Frank. I hope we're that way with young people today who call us. I mean, I know you could get a little cranky. You might just hang up on them, whatever. But that's another issue. But I remember, I'm just kidding, of course, I remember telling to Nat Lubay, who's he picking to win the fight? And he said something that made a lot of sense. He said, Chuvalo should take him apart, but I can't, because of Foreman's inexperience, but I can't see an investment like this losing. It makes no sense that they would put Foreman in a fight that he couldn't win. He wasn't saying it was fixed. And that's how it turned out. And that was, I think, the coming of George Foreman, the Chuvalo fight.
All right, Jack, you say that, and I'm glad you said that because you set me up for something that I think many people missed. Now, before I go into it, just tell me this. Foreman fought, and I think you were at this fight. Didn't he fight Louis Perez in
I
71?
was 71, but that was after the Shaballo fight.
Right. What was it? What month was that? Do you remember?
October 29th, 1971. Foreman stopped Luis Perez at the end of the fourth round.
The fourth round, right. Okay. Here's my point. Here's my point. After Shaballo, aside from Luis Perez, if you look at Foreman's record, you say, now look, he fought Wetner in his fourth fight. You say he was matched kind of tough, and I'll give you that. He fought Peralta twice in that interim. But after Shaballo, the only named guy he really fought was Luis Perez. And Jack, the reason for that was that, remember, Ali and Frazier fought in March of 71. And Frazier won. And Dick Sadler they wanted Foreman to get the title shot against Frazier, not Ali. And if you look at Foreman, how they managed him after he beat Shaballo and definitely after he beat Perez, Jack, he really didn't fight anybody that was good because they didn't want to take a chance because they knew he was in line to fight Frazier. And Dick Sadler had said, that's the man we want to fight because if you remember at the Quarry Ali rematch in June of 72, they were trying to push Foreman and Ali a little bit. And Ali wanted to fight Foreman because he wanted to get rid of all the contenders. So Frazier had nowhere to go but to fight him. But if you notice, of all the contenders Ali fought, the one guy he didn't fight was Foreman because Sadler says, we want to fight the man with the title, Muhammad, and George matches up better with him.
I'm not saying you're wrong, Frank, and maybe your account of things is more accurate than mine, but that's not how I remember it. I mean, when Ali had the enforced layoff, Frazier was his focus the moment Frazier beat Jimmy Ellis. I mean, Frazier was his focus all along, but I remember Ali even predicted Buster Mathis was going to beat Frazier. Like when he
picked everybody to beat him.
Yeah, no, because he didn't look at Frazier as being any more of a threat than anyone else during that time. But when Frazier destroyed Ellis, I mean, he basically cleared the decks, the year before they fought. And that was completely Ali's focus. In the meantime, before that, when he was out of the ring, all he wanted to do was get a license. He didn't care who he'd fight. He would even fought Frazier his first fight back if that was the only thing available.
Jack, you missed my point. My point is that Foreman's management, after the fight of the century, and especially since Frazier won, after that, Dick Sadler knew that George matched up better with Joe than he did Muhammad. On the other side, Ali's goal was, because in his mind, he believed Frazier didn't want to fight him again. And he said, I'm going to eliminate every contender there is. So Frazier has to fight me. The only guy he didn't fight, Jack, was George Foreman. And he tried to get that fight, but they wouldn't take Foreman's people wouldn't take the fight because it wasn't for the title. Dick Sadler was emphatic. Muhammad, we love you, but we want to fight the man that has the title.
There wasn't a big demand for any Ali Foreman fight for anyone to get hype about it.
Jack, was there demand for Ali fighting Bob Foster or Floyd Patterson in 72?
No, I agree.
Foreman would have been a bigger fight.
Ali and Frazier understood they were eventually going to have a rematch. Ali wasn't in a rush to have a rematch with Frazier. Okay, immediately. If it would have came, it would have came. It was inevitable that they were going to fight. And Frazier was out of the ring a while, and he had the two nonsensical title defenses, Terry Daniels and Ron Stander. And I was watching a clip of Ali recently from way back then, where they mention his opponents. Well, you're fighting this guy, that guy. And he says, look, everyone I'm fighting is better than Terry Daniels and Ron Stander. And he had a
I
good point.
remember that, Jack. But my point is, Ali, remember, Foreman wasn't considered, other than the Olympic champion being undefeated, he wasn't considered the monster that he was after Jamaica. And Ali wanted to fight him.
Yeah.
He wanted to fight him so he could eliminate a Frazier opponent. But what happened was, if you remember, Ali was ranked number 1. Frazier was ranked number 2, and he had to fight one of them or he was going to be stripped of the title. So instead of splitting the purse with Ali, he fought Foreman for 1/3 the money and lost. But all I'm saying is this: Foreman's people kept him away from rough opposition after the fight of the century, and Ali tried to fight Foreman before Frazier, but it just didn't work out because he wanted to eliminate everybody in the top 10, so Frazier had to fight him.
Foreman's people were extremely confident he beat Ali. That's after he beat Frazier. Okay,
right, but not
extremely.
before that.
Maybe so. I don't know what they were thinking, or what you heard in that regard. That could have been the
Jack,
case.
Dick Sadler said, we want the man with the title, and he's a better fit for George. Now, if you think about it, Frazier had the title.
Well, what's wrong with that?
No, you're right.
That's natural.
But
You want to fight the guy with the title because at that time the title meant a lot more than it did today. You know,
but not only did he have the title, Jack, he was a better matchup. I'm sure if Ali had the title, they would have fought him. But why, if you're managing Foreman and it's late 72 or summer 72, why would you fight Ali for no title when there's a chance he could expose your guy compared to the guy that's going to come right at him?
I agree, but I agree with you on that point. But it made me think, could you imagine the sanctioning bodies were around at the time that, you know, the Ali Frazier thing, and Frazier would have supposedly unified the title March 8th, 1971, and then he would have gotten stripped of the title in a matter of months. And you and I know full well a couple of the sanctioning bodies would have declared Ali the champion because he would have beaten Jimmy Ellis, or he would have fought Ellis for a vacant title 4 months later. And then you would have had a guy like Eddie Hearn go into his idiotic remarks about, oh, we got to unify the title. We got to unify. Like when Usyk gets stripped again, we're going to hear about whoever ascends to that silly belt that they pick up. We're going to hear about unifying the title again. But that's
Jack,
what would have went on with Ali and Frazier. Ali would have always had a title, always.
But Jack, that already happened because if you remember, when Ali beat Liston, the WBA stripped him because he gave him a rematch. So it's not like Ali couldn't have been stripped. He was stripped of that WBA title. I mean, and then remember, Terrell and Machin fought for it.
Shortly after the fight of the century. Shortly after he would have gotten.
Yes. Yeah. Today, that would be the case. You're right. He couldn't have milked it like he did for the year and a half or almost 2 years.
Joe Louis would have gotten, and Jimmy Braddock would have gotten stripped of the title for not fighting Max Schmeling for fighting
Schmeling,
Joe
exactly.
Louis instead. So Schmeling would have picked up a belt, maybe gone back to Nazi Germany and never fought Louis in the rematch, perhaps. So even though we have, I don't mean to go off on a tangent with the sanctioning bodies, even though they do some good and some great fights are made as a result of them, I think they cause on balance more harm because more great fights don't take place. It allows champions to avoid their most worthy contenders, like Canelo saying, oh, I got to fight William Skull. It's a mandatory title defense. I don't want to get stripped.
But Jack, you just reminded me of something else. Thank you. Everyone talks, and I'm one of them. You're not quite as bad, but everybody talks about the good old days. But remember, the fight, remember when Schmeling beat Lewis, I'm sorry. Yes, when Schmeling beat Lewis, Lewis got the title, and No, I'm sorry. When Braddock beat Bear, Schmeling had just beat Lewis, and Schmeling was the number one guy. But because they made a deal and they paid off Braddock to fight Lewis so he could get the title shot, it's the same thing. So my point is, boxing is always a business, has always been a business. Because remember, Schmeling deserved the shot at Braddock more than Lewis did. But Jacobs made the deal where if you fight us, we'll give you 10% or 20%, whatever the deal was. And so Schmeling said, or Braddock said, well, you know what the hell with that? I'm going to fight Lewis because I'm going to be the underdog against both. So I'm going to fight the guy that I'm going to get more money with. And maybe I get a piece of him down the road. And who knew back then that Lewis would hold the title for 12 years?
You know, I kind of wonder whether Braddock would have beaten Schmeling. He may have beaten them. I mean, Braddock would have been in with a solid chance. I'm not saying he would have beaten Schmeling.
Schmeling was clearly the better fighter, Jack.
Yeah, but
Braddock was.
But style-wise, he was on such a good run. And if you look at a common opponent, Max Baer destroyed Schmeling in 10 rounds.
You're right.
And Braddock did a masterful job of outboxing, you know, Max Baer. And look, even in comparison, the Lewis fight, okay? In the rematch, Lewis destroyed Schmeling. Lewis could not have been that much more psyched for the Schmeling rematch as he was for fighting Braddock for the title. Maybe it was a little more psyched, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying motivation-wise, it had to be in the same ballpark at least. And Braddock gave Lewis a good fight. He knocked him down in the first round, and it took Lewis
dropped him, yes, with the right hand.
How many fighters could have won 8 rounds with Lewis then? So
you're right, Jack. But back to Foreman and Chuvalo. Now, you at that time I was 12, and you were probably what, 35? Anyhow.
I was a teenager still.
Jack, at that time, after that fight, knowing that Chuvalo had gone 15 with Ali 4 years earlier, and Frazier got him in 4, what did you think of Foreman at that time? Did you think this guy's a future champ, or as soon as he fights Ali or Frazier, he's going to get squashed?
I thought he had future greatness in him. I thought we could be looking at the next Joe Louis type, maybe not being champion as many years, but I thought there was pure greatness ahead of him. I mean, you know, in big capital letters. I mean, the way he took Chuvalo apart,
he really beat him up
around the ring. But I tried to do a little comparison. Who did a better job on Chuvalo? Joe Frazier, George Foreman, because when they stopped the Foreman-Chuvalo fight, Chuvalo was in good enough shape to complain, like, what are you doing? I'm blocking these shots. Referee Arthur McCanty was justified stopping it, and Chuvalo's corner was even asking for it to be stopped. But years later, Chuvalo said, but I was blocking the punches. Yeah, the last few punches he was blocking before they stopped it, but he was getting hammered before those few punches. And Joe Frazier, he damaged Chuvalo terribly.
Well, Chuvalo said the eye injury happened 6 weeks before in his last fight, before he fought Frazier. But I think Foreman beat him up a little bit more than Frazier did.
Well, let me throw this at you. Foreman, he was still relatively early in his pro career when he took Chuvalo
14
apart.
months.
And that George Foreman of 1970, not the one that improved, you know, in 73, that was an absolute monster. If you took the Joe Frazier who fought early in the year against Jimmy Ellis and put him in against the inexperienced but rising Foreman, do you think that version of Joe Frazier maybe catches Foreman before Foreman arrives as a monster?
All right, so let me get this straight. Foreman who fought Frazier who fought Jimmy Ellis against the Foreman that fought Peralta that night?
Well, let's make it easier. Forget Chuvalo, the Foreman that fought Peralta, who went 10 rounds. I don't think that Foreman. I know you say he beat Frazier any day of the week style wise, and even Frazier kind of agrees with you on that. Agreed with you on that point that he didn't think the him that beat Ali could have ever beaten Foreman because of style. I actually got him to admit it to me. He agreed, and he said, I said, is it because of styles? And he said, that's exactly it. But
You know what,
hey,
Jack?
Craig, how you doing?
Hello, Craig. You
But
know,
that young novice of a
I know
Foreman,
you're
I
saying
think Frazier stops him.
the Frazier that beat Jimmy Ellis was the second best Frazier we ever saw after the fight of the century. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, Jack, after looking in hindsight, after their two fights, Frazier and Foreman, knowing now, looking back, I'm not sure Joe beats him that night. I just think that
Wow.
it's so wrong for him. I mean, and you're right. Foreman improved in leaps and bounds between February of 70 and January of 73. But I guess if there was the best chance for Frazier to win, it would have been then. But I'll take it one step further. If someone said to you, now I watched that fight on closed circuit. Did you go to that one?
I listen. You're talking about that
Frazier Ellis.
I actually, believe it or not, Frank, listened on the radio. As it took place. We actually had boxing on the radio at that time.
Was it blow by blow that night, or was it round summary?
Frazier Ellis was on the radio, but Foreman Peralta wasn't. I'd have to catch the replay of Foreman Peralta later. I didn't see it when it took place live. Their second fight, Foreman Peralta, in 1972, the rematch was like 3 fights closed circuit. Ernie Terrell and oh boy.
Was that? I thought it was 71. They fought in 72, the rematch?
Yeah, 72. Yeah, Foreman stopped him. Ernie Terrell was on that show, and there was a third fight. I think Ernie Terrell and Luis Pierres was fought, if I'm not mistaken, on that show.
All right, so here's my question. If someone would have said to you, but it's kind of hard for you to answer because you didn't see the fight. Also, I'll just throw it back on me and then you comment.
I saw the replay.
If someone, but I saw both fights live on closed circuit. If someone would have said to me at the end of that broadcast, Foreman goes the distance with Peralta and Frazier smokes Ellis. If someone would have said to me, Foreman, not Ali, is the guy that's going to take Frazier's title, I think I might have said, you're out of your mind.
Well, you were younger and you didn't take into consideration the experience factor. Then people weren't really thinking, Foreman was a pro less than a year. That's astonishing. And
that's the point, Jack. I don't think anybody thought Foreman was going to be the guy or would ever be regarded as great as Frazier.
Well, as time went along, I'm not just saying this in hindsight. I really did pick him to knock Frazier out in the first fight because I thought Frazier, after the Ali fight, was declining, and I really thought Foreman was the real thing. Listen, I've been wrong so many times in predictions. I'm not boasting that I'm an expert. I'm just talking about that one particular fight. I remember thinking Foreman was going to knock him out in 4 rounds.
Really?
Yeah, I've made so many wrong predictions, Frank. Believe me, I'm not gloating or bragging. I could go down a list.
I understand that.
My bad predictions, but it's just happening to come up in conversation.
And I thought Foreman was tailor-made for Frazier, Joe. I thought he would be big and slow, couldn't get out of the way of Frazier's shots. I never thought he could do that much damage to Frazier before Frazier could get inside.
I don't want to miss this, and you could tell us a really nice story involving yourself, but I want to give some recognition. We've mentioned Muhammad Ali so many times on this show, that his brother sometimes, Rahman Ali, slipped under the radar. Okay, Really, really nice man. If you want to, Rahman Ali, or it's spelled Rahman Ali, you could put his name and my name and Google it. And I did a question and answer interview with him a few years ago, if anyone wants to take a look at it. But you did better than that. I just had a phone conversation. You actually sat at the same table and hung out, with Muhammad Ali, Rahman Ali, Jimmy Brown. I mean, that's awesome stuff, Frank.
Jack, I met Rahman Ali 2 times. The first time I met him was, I think it was July 22nd. It was the night after the Carl Williams Mike Tyson fight. Sugar Ray died in April of '89. Donald Trump threw a dinner in honor of Robinson. It was called the Sugar Ray Robinson Tribute. It was at Trump. I think it was at the Taj Mahal.
I didn't know that.
July 29th, 1989. So I met Rahman Ali there, and the picture I posted, that was that night. Fast forward 2 years. If you remember that they had the Ali Frazier Fight of the Century 20-year anniversary celebration that Ali's kids and Frazier's kids put together. It was at the hotel atop the Bourse or the Bellevue in Philly. So long story short, I'm getting my credential. There's a guy there who hears me talking to Marvis Frazier about, because I was a fight collector then, Jack, and I had a lot of Ali's fights and a lot of Frazier's. So I'm talking to Marvis about the fights I have of his father, and this guy, Davis Miller, a writer for Sport Magazine who became friends with Ali, he came up to me and he said, "Do you have any of Ali's fights?" I said, "I have 54 of Ali's 61 fights total and complete." He goes, "Wow." He goes, "Would you like to meet the champ?" I said, "Well, I've met the champ before, but I'll never turn down a chance to do it again." So he brings me up to the room, Ali's suite. There's like 3 rooms together. He knocks on the door. Ali answered the door wearing a white dress shirt, black tuxedo pants, black shoes, and Davis Miller says, "Champ, this guy," and he points to me, "knows more about you than you." Ali gives me a high five. We go into the living room of the suite. Sitting there is Jim Brown, Howard Bingham, and Ali's mother was in the kitchen. So Davis introduces me to Ali as like the biggest Ali fan. We start talking. He starts asking me questions about Cherry Hill, where he used to live. And I said, "Do you remember when your house was the biggest house back there?" And he laughed. I said, "Now there are garages bigger than your house."
Oh, wow.
He got a kick out of that. And in Jack, in the kitchen, Jim Brown and Ali's mother are playing cards. So in the living room, it's me, Rahman, Muhammad, and Davis Miller. We were there for 3 hours. I mean, guys came to the door bringing food up, and they see Ali. "Oh my God, it's Muhammad Ali!" He'd take a picture and sign their autograph. Hung out with them the whole night. So now it's time. It's like 7 o'clock. Time to go to the dinner. We leave for the dinner in the elevator. It's me, Davis Miller, Muhammad, and Rahman Ali. Ali leans down in my ear, my right ear. He's standing to my right, and he whispers something to me that he always says to people that they never have a comeback for.
Yeah,
Jack, I had a comeback for it. He was speechless. He looked at me again. He gave me a high five, and he went like this. and he laughed, and I went and I sat with Ali's mother, Jim Brown, Rahman, and Davis Miller during the festivities. We laughed. We had a great time. Then when at the end of the night comes, we go back up to the suite. Ali's there. They gave him some kind of a belt that night. He gave it to his daughter, Miriam. And we sat back down and we started talking again. And it was really, really a fun time.
That's fantastic. I mean, that tops anything I've ever done. I could brag, well, I had dinner with the Raging Bull, Jake LaMotta, and stuff like that. But what
3 straight hours, Jack, with Ali sitting next to me.
Did you get to say much to Jimmy Brown, or did you interact with him?
Not too much interaction with him. He was just nice. He just shook my hand, and he went in the other room. And Allie's mother, they just played cards. I spoke mostly with Muhammad, and
You
Rockman.
love football. I don't get this. You love football, and you had JB, one of my favorites, the guy who Max said was the greatest football player ever, Jim Brown.
But Jack, Ali was in the same room, and I'm sorry. When Ali's in the same room and Jim Brown's there, I'm not thinking about Jim Brown. But I'll give you a funny story. And I don't like to tell this story because it makes my man Smoking Joe look bad. But this is an interesting story. Do you remember back then there was the Wilfred Sheen book that had Ali's face on the cover, but it was all filled with sweat? The cover was his face.
Picture you mean. I think I know the picture.
Okay.
You mean.
And that book was about 100 pages, and it was all pictures of Ali's fights and his personal life. So Davis Miller knew Ali really well, and he had a hardcover of that book. He said one day he's at Ali's house. He says, and Ali pulls out a pen, and he starts flipping through the pages. And he starts writing what he remembers about that picture, that event, if it was a fight or whatever. And there must have been, he said, over 100 passages that Ali wrote in that book on the picture about what happened that day. So now at the Ali Frazier dinner, there's an intermission, and Ali's standing on one side, Joe's next to him on the other side, and you could bring up memorabilia for them to sign. So Davis says to me, he goes, Frank, he says, look, he goes, I got 1 million Ali signatures. He goes, I don't want his signature. He goes, I want Joe's. I said, okay, I'll get in line with you. Maybe Frazier will recognize me from the gym. We get in line. He brings the book up to Joe. Frazier opens the book, Jack, and he starts thumbing through it. And he sees all the things that Ali wrote and signed. Nothing negative about him, but how many times Ali touched the book. So he says to Davis, he goes, I see my man's in here a lot. He goes, what's in the budget for me? And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, do you want me to pay you, Joe? He says, yeah. He goes, you're going to sell this book. And Davis says, Joe, he goes, I'm never going to sell this book. He goes, I'm going to leave it to my son when I die, and I hope when he dies, he leaves it to a museum or something. Frazier wouldn't sign the book, Jack.
I don't blame Frazier, and I'm going to tell you something similar with Frazier. You know that I'm a big Frazier fan. I revere Joe Frazier to this day. And anything I had of his, okay, I would keep for myself. I would never sell it. But I had a copy of his book, and I figured I would just get it autographed for my collection. Cardinal mistake. You don't make that as a member of the media, and I made that mistake, which I shouldn't have made in a certain setting, okay? But because I know what my intentions were. But years later, I made it up to Joe. I had some memorabilia that he didn't have, and I gave it to him.
Nice.
There was like a 40th anniversary of the Ali Frazier fight, and I had arranged through Joe's representative at the time for him to come to this private party done by like this airline. I did a big story on the Ali Frazier anniversary for the airline, and they said, could you get Joe? We'll get him an appearance fee, this. And I made the contact, and when I went to the party, I gave it to Joe, that thing. So I felt better. I made up for my blunder I made. But Joe was right. There's a good chance someone eventually sells it. You like it?
Davis would have never sold that book, Jack.
I believe you what you said. I didn't know Miles Davis. And he write for Sport Magazine?
Yes.
Yeah. Something he wrote.
It's Davis Miller.
Davis Miller, right? I'm sorry, Davis Miller.
He wrote his article. The first one was called "My Dinner with Ali."
Right. But he also wrote ways how you can beat Mike Tyson. before the Buster Douglas fight, in no way, shape, or form did he pick Buster Douglas to beat Mike Tyson. It was a generic story that, Frank, you could have written in an hour, just sat down. Yeah, you keep him at the end of the jab. You don't get intimidated. If he gets, you don't lean into his uppercut because that's his main punch. So when Douglas wins the fight, they're coming out Sport Magazine like to take credit on this guy's story, like he picked, Douglas to win, which he absolutely didn't do.
Did not, right.
It kind of ticked me up. But listen, that doesn't mean he's not a very nice guy. He sounds like a very nice. He sounded
Jack,
like
he's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
And he and Ali were legitimate friends eventually. Remember, how he met Ali was he knocked at his house. Ali was in Louisville at his mother's house, and Davis just knocked at the door, and they invited him in, and he had dinner with them, and he cultivated a relationship with Ali that lasted from then until he died.
Tell me, okay, so how many interactions did you have with Ali's brother? My only interaction was interviewing him, question and answer on the phone. That was the only interaction I ever had with Ali's brother, and that was 4 years ago, and he wasn't in the best of shape then.
Okay, he was fine back in 1991. During the time, the 3 hours we were up in the suite, he would just back Ali up on a few things that he said. He would add a little bit, and he kept on telling me that I reminded him of the actor Richard Harris. That's what he kept on calling me the whole night, Richard Harris. And we laughed about that. I didn't ask him too much about his career. He was basically just backing up anything that Muhammad said or adding things to it or that Howard Bingham said. And, we sat during the dinner and we just talked about the night. I didn't press him about this, that, or the other.
Frank, you remember his fight on the Ali Frazier, the undercard?
Fought Danny McLinden.
Right. Do you remember the fight?
Vaguely.
I actually remember the fight, and I remember scoring it 3 rounds apiece. But if I had to give it to anyone, I would have given it to McAlinden, who had.
I thought McAlinden edged it that night, Jack, but I was 12, 13.
And he did get the decision. It was Rockman's first loss. Rockman, at the time, I read, that he was put out by his brother not being there because he was so used to his brother being there. Even the night Ali beat Sonny Liston for the title, Rockman was on the undercard and Ali was in the crowd watching the fight. But I guess the first Frazier fight was so tension-filled, he wasn't out there. It would have created too much of a ruckus, and probably Muhammad was so attuned into his own fight, he couldn't worry about his brother's fight.
Now, you know the story about, I don't know if it's true. I've heard it and I read it, that Ali told Jack O'Halloran that if he beat Rockman, when he got the title back, he'd give him a title shot because he didn't want Rockman to continue because he was afraid because of him being Ali's brother that people would go after him trying to beat Ali up. And he said he knew Rockman wasn't quite, he wasn't an elite fighter.
Rockman, I guess you could call him a good club fighter.
14-3-1, right.
Yeah, good club fighder. And
he fought on the undercard of Ali Corey 1.
Yeah, he could fight it. It wasn't like he wasn't. He was not a contender by a long shot, but yeah, not too bad. I'd compare him to maybe he was something like Dwayne Bobbick's brother, Rodney Bobbick, and that kind
That's a fair comparison.
Something like that. Yeah, he couldn't. But in this day and age, if he were fighting today, he could piggyback off the Ali name and get a title shot. He'd be with Jake Paul. He would have fought Jake Paul, Ali's brother. And Paul, I'm not sure Paul would have beaten him. But let's say Paul would have beaten him, then he would have called out Muhammad, this and that. Muhammad would have loved
like he's doing now, right?
He would have loved it.
I'll give you a funny exchange, Jack. At the Sugar Ray Robinson dinner, who was there? Frazier, Giardello, Graziano, Fulmer, Ken Norton, a bunch of guys were there. Patterson. And when Frazier saw Rockman, he walked up to him and he said, he put his hand out. He says, Rock, how you doing? And he put his arm around him and he said, where's the champ at? And Rockman said, Joe, he had a prior commitment. He couldn't make it. But Frazier said, where's the champ? And I heard that because I was standing very close to them, and it kind of threw me a little bit that Frazier said that in 1989. You're muted, Jack.
It sounds like Frazier had some devious intentions, the way you make it sound, because he didn't like Ali in 91. I know in 2021, when I spoke to Rockman, interviewed him after Ali had passed Muhammad 5 years before, he told me that Muhammad loved Joe Frazier. He absolutely thought the world of him. And Rockman said he did too, that Frazier wasn't only a great fighter, but such a kind-hearted, wonderful human being. So both Ali brothers, they exited with nothing but the warmest, most wonderful feelings for Joe Frazier. But Frazier had a lot of resentment, and justifiably so, against Ali for a lot of years with all of Ali's antics. Now, it always made me wonder, Frank, Ali could have squashed the resentment a lot of years earlier, but I think at least. You knew Frazier better than I did. I met him a few times, spent an afternoon with him, but you knew him. There's a difference between me spending a few times with a guy and knowing him, and you knew him. But had Ali at some point, knowing the way Joe resented everything that went on, went to Philadelphia and privately met with Joe upstairs in the gym behind closed doors and looked him in the eye and said, Joe, forgiveness takes time. It's easy for you to say you'll forgive me, but I'm here to tell you that I'm truly sorry about the things I said, the hurt I caused, the friendship that I betrayed. I just want you to know, I just want you to believe I'm sincere. You don't have to forgive me, but I want you to believe that I'm sincere about it. And Joe would have been a type of guy, I think the healing would have begun, at that
I
moment.
agree, Jack. That did happen in 2002 at the All-Star game in Philly.
Many years later, but so many years went by where Ali allowed it to go by. He had,
And Jack, here's my take. And remember, at Frazier's gym, the 5 years I trained there, we were not allowed to say the words Muhammad Ali. It was never brought up. I think the issue that Joe had was he saw it through a small prism. He looked at Ali and himself as near equals in the ring, but Jack, outside of the ring, Ali was a world superstar, where Frazier was a nice, regular guy who happened to be a great fighter.
Yeah.
And I just think that Frazier would sit there and say to himself, I beat him in the biggest fight. All three of our fights went down to the wire. Why does everybody make a big deal over him? And I just don't think that Frazier ever grasped that Ali was such a superstar. And I think he thought that Ali was a phony when he would talk about, race, and he'd say, I'm blacker than him. And Ali would bring in the religion and the politics. And I just think that just turned Joe off completely.
Joe is correct. I saw in the Ali interview with Howard Cosell going back from 72 or something. And Ali was calling it a white man's decision that Frazier gave over him and all of the stuff that Ali talked about. But you're right. Ali was bigger than life. He couldn't take Ali on in winning the court of public opinion. In other words,
only in the ring.
We have a little feud in basketball. It's a one-way feud. Scottie Pippen resents Michael Jordan because of what went on in The Last Dance. And he wrote a book, Scottie Pippen. He trashed Jordan. But Scottie Pippen is Joe Frazier, Scottie Pippen, Muhammad Ali's Michael Jordan. That's the gulf. You're not going to bring Jordan down unless Jordan foolishly does an interview and says something that's really bad that takes off.
I agree, Jack. And again, if you take Ali off of Frazier's record, his standing isn't quite as high. Where if there's no Frazier, Ali is still the guy.
Yeah, yeah. You sometimes wonder if Ali didn't exist, would Frazier have continued to train hard until he'd meet George Foreman? Let's say they still met in 1973. I kind of feel they would have met in 72. The timeline would have been moved up.
They would have met in 72, Jack, but Frazier would have been more hungry and a better version of himself. Once he beat Ali, he conquered the mountain that was over his head his whole life.
He would have been a better version of himself. Foreman would have still beaten him, but I don't think it would have been the fiasco it was, the 6 knockdowns in 2 rounds. I think Foreman would have controlled him and maybe stopped him in 7 rounds, something like that. You know, it would have been closer to their second fight, and Frazier maybe would have done a little better than he did in their second fight when he was stopped in 5 rounds.
See, Jack, I'm not sure about that, though, because Frazier would never back up for Foreman the first time they fought, no matter what year it was, where the second time they fought, he tried to fight Frazier or Foreman like Duran did Hagler. He just wasn't as good at it.
But you're missing the point that you made. It would have been a better if Ali didn't come into Frazier's life. Frazier probably would have been champ when he met Foreman the first fight.
He'd be fighting for his legacy more.
Right. And he would have been a better version of Joe Frazier than Foreman ever actually fought. That's why I feel he would have done better, but he would have lost to Foreman in any event. But he would have been but I don't think it would have been like a 2-round blitz, 6 knockdowns. I think he would have been more durable, better defensively, better conditioned. And just my thought on it. And maybe Foreman too, Frank, would have fought him a little sooner than Kingston, so maybe he wouldn't have quite been as good as he was in Kingston, as awesome. He still would have won, Foreman. So you're not getting an argument there, but I kind of feel it would have been
that's plausible.
Perhaps competitive.
Jack, we could talk about those guys all night. Let's change it up a little bit. I know you're not crazy about this topic, but it's going to start getting some attention. And that is that the president, Ike Ibeabuchi, is coming back to fight Danny Williams August 23rd. Ike Ibeabuchi was taken out of boxing for some personal reasons. He left it 20-0, 15 knockouts. As you're talking, I'm going to look up and try to see how old he is because I forget. He may be almost 50. What do you think about that? Well, before he's 52. What did you think about Ibeabuchi before he went away?
Intriguing. I wasn't as high on him as other people were. He kind of reminded me of Tony Ayala. Okay, I think Tony Ayala, and then I'll get to Ike, would have stopped Davey more, maybe sooner than Roberto Duran did. But I don't think
I agree with that.
Tony Ayala at his best at junior middleweight would have beat, let's say, Mike McCallum. So I don't think Tony Ayala would have been the absolute superstar. He would have been a big name. He would have won a couple of world titles. Ike stopped Chris Bird in 5 rounds. Impressive. You know, he caught Chris Bird. Good for him. He went the distance with 2 and won a close decision. You know,
could have gone either way.
A great fighter like a Vladimir Klitschko would have dominated Tua the way Lennox Lewis did. They would have, you know, outboxed him from the outside and beaten him decisively. Then again, he was able to absorb Tua's power. How many fighters could have absorbed Tua's power? And it's like you have the guts to point out, which most people don't have the guts in a hypothetical matchup. You would have picked Tua over peak Mike Tyson based on styles. I mean, you know, I'd have to think that one out, but kudos to you because that's a plausible prediction, if not a good one, perhaps. I don't know. I have to give that a lot of thought. I think I'd come back at his age. Mentally, there's something off with this guy. Wasn't he incarcerated? I mean, Did he get counseling or what? And even if he did, age 50?
I didn't follow it that much, Jack. I know he's a little bit wacky. I know he's in tremendous shape, but I mean, I just
How do you
don't have
know
much
that? How do you know that?
expectation.
Because he took a picture lifting weights in the gym and taking his shirt off.
Our buddy Lehman Pauly is friends with him, and he told me how much he's training.
Lehman, how's
So,
Lehman
but that
friends
doesn't
with
mean anything.
how's he friends with him?
They know. I don't know how they know each other from the gym or something where he was training, but they know each other as of recently. I'll say this though,
Okay.
Jack. When I took apart Chris Bird, no one else was landing a punch on Chris Bird. So I got to give him credit for that. And it wasn't like he caught him with a lucky shot. He cut the ring off and worked his way in and stopped them. And the fact, like you just said, that he could stand in the kitchen with Tua in the heat of battle. And even though I thought that fight could have gone either way, I think I scored at 6-5-1 Tua. The fact that he could hang with a guy like Tua and actually hang with him, fighting him, not boxing him and moving, fighting him. The guy had potential, and we just don't know, Jack, what would have happened. I mean, think about this. He beat Tua in 97. If he keeps going, how does that change history? He would have run into the Klitschko's and Lewis.
You're saying no one touched Chris Bird. Jameel McCline knocked down Chris Bird.
But he didn't hurt him, Jack, or come close to beating him.
No, it was close. It was a close decision at the end. I think it was a split decision. I was at ringside, and I had Bird up 1 point, and I think that's what the judges basically had. Bird came on the second half, and had McCline not faded in the second half, he was going to upset Chris Bird, okay, in that fight. In other words, Ike is a mystery. I
want to go back. Hey, I want to go back and I want to see when that fight was.
Ibeabuchi is a mystery. We don't know. I'm not ready to say he would have been all that.
I'm not ready to say that.
He had a couple of
okay, let's see.
He definitely would have been in the mix. Maybe who would he have had to beat for the championship? Do I think he would have beaten Lennox Lewis? The answer is no. Is it possible?
He might have beat the 90. I mean, we don't know. He would have had to beat Lennox Lewis. That would have been tough. Let's see.
Yeah. Could he have beaten guys like Shannon Briggs? Yeah, but is he going to beat? Would he have beaten an Evander Holyfield? I mean, I don't think so.
I don't know, Jack. I don't know about that.
Would he have beaten a Riddick?
Jack, wait a second, though. Chris Bird fought Jameel McCline in 2004. He fought Ibeabuchi in 99. He was a far different fighter then when he fought Ibeabuchi. He drew a Galata. He lost to Klitschko. He lost to Povetkin. No, he drew a Galata. Then he fought Chris Bird. It was a split decision, though.
What did Ibeabuchi? I mean, what did Chris Bird do right before losing to Ibeabuchi, and what did he do right after?
Okay, let's see.
And Chris Bird wasn't really a heavyweight.
He beat Ross Purity in his fight before Chris Bird. I mean, before Ibeabuchi.
Yeah, but listen, Chris Bird wasn't a true heavyweight. He was a small guy who put on weight. He was a manufactured heavyweight. I mean, don't tell me you think of Chris Bird as being like a real heavyweight.
No, Jack, I'm not saying that. But the idea is nobody stopped him or came close until Ibeabuchi did it.
Listen, Frank, he would have beaten guys like John Ruiz. I think Ibeabuchi would have knocked guys out like that, okay? So I think he would have been in the mix, but I can't say he would have beaten a Holyfield. I wouldn't have picked him against a prime Mike Tyson. I mean,
Jack, think about this though.
Like Razor Ruddock, yeah, I could see him beating.
You're going to scoff at this, but after Bird lost to Ibeabuchi, okay, he beat Ribalta and then he beat Vitaly Klitschko. So he wasn't dead.
Wait. On paper, he beat Vitaly Klitschko was dominating against Chris Bird, and he suffered a horrific shoulder injury and quit on the stool. Klitschko out of nowhere.
Bird Bird won a
dominated
few
in that
rounds of that fight. And Jack, the bottom line is he still beat Vitaly Klitschko. He was in there with him for 9 rounds and didn't get hurt or dropped.
I mean, at the end of the fight, he was fighting with a damaged shoulder that he injured during the fight. Klitschko. Bird was lucky that he got the retirement, but kudos.
Then he lost to Vladimir in his next fight.
He got stopped by Vladimir, right?
Well, they fought twice. He lost a decision to Vladimir in 2000, and then Vladimir stopped him in 2006.
You know what? Okay, so let me throw this by you. We can't have it both ways. We've both been guilty of this. We say, the thing why it's hard to rate Vladimir Klitschko as an all-time great heavyweight, we always say, well, who did he fight? Why don't we ever give him credit for the victories over Chris Bird?
That's a good win.
Alex Povetkin. All we do is mention David Haye as the best guy. I mean, but we never give him, but we dismiss the Chris Bird fights and forget about him.
But Jack, then he fought Chris Bird a while after Abeyabuchi stopped him.
Yeah.
So Abeyabuchi beat him when nobody was touching him.
But let me ask you, what do you think would have been with Abeyabuchi had he continued fighting in his prime? How far would he have gone? Not could have gone, would have gone. What do you think?
I think his potential, Jack, from what he showed, he looked like a modern Sonny Liston because he was a boxer and he could punch and he had a good chin. I mean, we look back at Lennox Lewis now as one of the greats. I mean, it's hard to say he would have beat him, but I think he would have been in the mix and at the top of the division.
He would have been in the mix because he was a legitimately good fighter. I'm just saying, I'm not saying he was the monster everyone is making him.
I'm not saying that either. I'm not saying that. I mean, a lot of guys fall in love with him off those 20 fights. We don't know, but I'll just say this. He went head-to-head with Tua. Nobody has done that fighting Tua. Even in the fights he lost, he was outboxed. Abeyabuchi fought him, and it was basically a standstill. And he beat Chris Bird more impressively than anybody.
You know, you make me laugh, Frank. You love his football. You're a Miami Dolphin fan. Could you imagine the Dolphin owner was crazy enough to hire you and put you in charge of the draft? You get to film and see a guy play 2 great games in college. You go, man, oh man.
Jack, that is such a cheap shot, and it's not true. It's not true.
Abeyabuchi would be a number 1 draft.
It's not true. I know this much. I wouldn't have drafted Tua.
Lennox Lewis, the Klitschko brothers, and he would be a draft choice.
I didn't say that. I wouldn't have drafted the China doll named Tua Tagovailoa or whatever his name is.
Well, in the 3rd round.
All right, Jack. We don't have a whole lot because we're going to have to be creative because there's not much going on.
We got 1 minute left, but I'm not going to be able to do the show next week. I'm going to be on vacation. I don't know whether you have a guest host filling in for me because we're down to about 45 seconds now.
I will work on that between now and then. And Jack, there's really not that much going on. There's not. Yeah. Have you talked to Mr. Lopez since our interview?
No, I haven't. No. Okay, so that basically is it for this show. I think our time allotment is off, but it was a lot of fun, Frank, like normal. And we'll go at it again in a couple of weeks, but you'll be in with someone else taking my slot next week.
All right, Jack. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next week.